I have absolutely no qualms admitting that I used to watch a lot of Sargon of Akkad a couple of years ago. He wasn't my introduction to online political discourse by any means, but he was certainly a big part of my media diet. And unlike many of those who proclaim to be reformed today, I still have absolutely no feelings of guilt or shame for having been an unironic Sargon fan back in the day. This is because, in spite of what you may want to believe and what many people may tell you that you should believe, Sargon of Akkad, aka Carl Benjamin, wasn't always a right-wing hack. Now, don't get me wrong, he most certainly is a right-wing hack. I'm sure he still has a good take every once in a while, but frankly, it's the only two people that I have ever found in the world that just consistently, exclusively have horrific takes are Stefan Molyneux and Graham Linehan. And it's impressive, actually. I am legitimately impressed by how consistently bad their opinions are. And really, I don't even want to talk primarily about Sargon. I want to talk about you, dear viewer, should you be one of those, oh, I can't believe that I ever fell for this guy's bullshit type people, because I have great news for you. You didn't. And there's also a very good reason why you think you did. Listen, you cannot, in all seriousness and with intellectual honesty, claim that Sargon was always on the far right, or even the right at all. I know that some people have been saying this since basically he started his channel, but it's just not true. As much as many people would like to forget that this was ever the case, I distinctly remember Sargon Bernie Sanders is objectively the best choice for President of the United States of Akkad. And also, Carl, if we could elect the European Commission, then I would be a Remainer, because the idea of a united Europe that stands together is fundamentally a good one, Benjamin. I remember getting banned off Twitter for sending gay porn to alt-right accounts, Sargon. Now, of course, let's not delude ourselves, he always had some center-right tendencies. He has a kind of patriotic obsession with what he considers to be British ideals, which, if we're entirely honest with ourselves, includes some left-wing ideals that historically were very much not British ideals. But Sargon considers them to be British values nonetheless. But I can pinpoint the precise subject matter that led me to slowly distance myself from Sargon of Akkad, and which I think is the thing that changed him as a person and a political commentator. And you probably have the exact same one if your story was anything like mine. Yes, it's Donald Trump, because everything in this day and age can be broken down to being about Donald Trump. Back during the 2016 election in the United States, which seems like centuries ago. I wasn't even running this channel back then. Back then, Sargon of Akkad could reasonably be called a leftist, albeit a centrist kind of a leftist. And he started defending Donald Trump. Now, specifically, he started to defend Donald Trump against Hillary Clinton, who is one of the worst human beings to have ever lived. And Sargon portrayed Donald Trump as a marginally better option than Hillary Clinton. Now, the rationale for this was that a populist madman would at least bring some movement into the fundamentally and deeply corrupt government system that is the United States, as opposed to the guaranteed business as usual Hillary Clinton. At least there was a chance for some kind of change. There was a chance that a Trump presidency would be a warning shot for the elites in the United States to finally do something for the working class. And you may laugh at this now, or you may even foam at the mouth for people having fallen for this heinous right-wing act of trickery, but you are doing so with the benefit of hindsight, so it doesn't really count. Back in 2016, nobody had the benefit of hindsight. I mean, Slavoj Žižek made effectively the same argument back then. He just had the good sense to also say that he was horrified of him. Nobody is questioning Slavoj Žižek's leftist credentials. doing so would be absurd. But he also didn't slowly come around to turn into a nigh religious Trump supporter in the way that Sargon did. And I think there's two reasons for this. First of all, and this may sound elitist, but you have to admit it's true, Slavoj Žižek is a lot more educated on the philosophy and the political science. He understands why he believes what he believes a lot more than Carl Benjamin, and is just generally a smarter guy. But more importantly, because it's not like Carl is an idiot, Slavoj Žižek doesn't make his money talking about Donald Trump every day. As much as some airheads would like to think of him as a modern-day iconoclastic political philosopher, I don't think even Sargon himself would have trouble admitting that he is in fact a talking head, a political pundit. Things happen, and he gives you his takes on them. That is what he does for a living in the highly charged political climate of today. And before you disparage this practice on principle, let me remind you that you are subscribed to David Pakman and Kyle Kulinski and consider what they do to be very important, and rightly so. Which, if you haven't, you should be subscribed to those channels. And if I'm entirely honest, right, Kyle Kulinski did, and I dread to say this term, but it's the best term to describe the concept that I am about to describe. Back when the anti-SJW bubble sort of burst, ripped apart, and the creators therein split to different political directions because SJWs weren't really a problem anymore, Kyle Kulinski was the one who kept me left more than anyone else. Except maybe the Cumtown podcast, but that is a completely different story. Because as much as I would like to think of myself as being ascended beyond the pitfalls of political tribalism, I have to admit that this isn't as true as I would like it to be. And if you, like me, are in fact a human, the same is true for you. A big part of why I don't commentate on current events is because I don't want to get dragged into that mindset. I don't want to discuss people, I don't want to discuss events, I want to discuss ideas. But I also realize that sometimes, in order to discuss ideas, you need to discuss people and events. And also, discussing people and events is where the money is at. And the farther you go down the political spectrum, the more money there is, because not only do you get ultra crowdfunding from people who share your more extreme ideas and are more committed to their politics, but if you go to the right, you also might get lucky and fall into some ultra think tank money. Listen, neoconservatives have astroturfing down to a fucking science. This is what happened to Dave Rubin. He also wasn't always a right-wing hack. He used to be an actual leftist with leftist ideas working for the Young Turks before he became, you know, what he is now. But more than just money, it also comes with approval and a certain ease of political thought. Unless you are an actual psychopath, you crave human approval, and you don't like it when people call you a poo-poo head with doo-doo political ideas. This is true for every political commentator that exists in the entire world at all times, and it is also true for Dave Rubin and Sargon of Akkad because they are humans who are susceptible to human temptations and biases. Let me tell you from experience that it is completely irrelevant what kind of political opinion you express. Once you have a certain platform, people will come and find you and tell you that you are either an idiot or an evil person. And as much as some people will tell you to stand above the haters, not only is this literally not how the human brain has evolved, it's also a pretty bad idea when it comes to doing politics. You know the meme where the worst person in the world has just made a great point? When you talk politics solely on the basis of the raw ideas, this will happen to you all of the time. And dealing with this requires a lot of emotional work, because accepting it and integrating it into your philosophical framework of how you see the world runs entirely counter to the tribalistic instincts that we are born with. It makes your life a lot easier to simply decry all opposition as idiotic ideologues and snakes and evildoers, and value the opinions of your political in-group more highly simply because it is your political in-group. And for public political commentators, especially on YouTube, I would argue that the biggest factor in that regard is their audience. I know we all talk about having principles, but you cannot fathom the amount of pressure that Sargon is exposed to based on other people's opinions every single day of his life. And especially if your professional mindset is always on, always thinking about the current political news items, it's very easy to lose perspective of the bigger picture. And that is exactly what happens. It is why Tim Pool, despite constantly engaging in right-wing apologia, can still think of himself as a leftist. These people were cast adrift in stormy seas and were so busy surviving the wave after wave that eventually they found themselves in a place where they never expected to find themselves, and decided, because they wanted to feel like they have agency, that this was where their path had led them all along. Not in the least because also this is where the money and the approval is. So when you say, I can't believe I didn't see that Sargon was a right-winger, I absolutely can believe that. It's because he wasn't and has since changed. The only reason that you see stepping stones in revealing his true self over the course of time is because you have the benefit of hindsight once again. This is also why you will have people in this very comment section pointing out all of the right-wing things that Sargon used to say back in the day, and then going, oh look, this is proof that he was always a right-winger. Congratulations if back in the day you called Sargon eventually becoming a right-winger, you have won the bragging rights of someone who won a cool bet. But everything else is just hindsight bias. People change. This is a universal constant, and nowhere is it as ironically obvious as in the people who are ashamed of ever having considered Sargon to be someone they looked up to. All the time on social media, I see posts like, oh, I can't believe I was ever friends with Sargon. And it's like, yes, I absolutely can believe that. You weren't friends with current Sargon of Akkad. You were friends with an earlier version of the same guy who had different political beliefs. This is true about Dave Rubin. This is true about Tim Pool. This is true about Sargon of Akkad. You didn't see that they were secretly right-wing because they weren't. This is a tale as old as time. We don't like to think of people as constantly changing for the same reason that we don't like constantly having to examine our political beliefs. It's a lot of work, emotionally and intellectually, and we only have a limited amount of both of those resources to spare. It is way easier for us to believe that this person just always held these beliefs, but was secretive about them, and instead of thinking that maybe they changed their beliefs over time, because doing so would create a lot of uncertainty. After all, it opens the door to the idea that what if the people we think are right today turn out to be wrong tomorrow? The German word for disappointed is enttäuscht, which literally translates to undeceived, as in I used to be deceived, but now I am not. Now, of course, there is such a thing as dishonest actors, but I think that fundamentally this reasoning is fallacious. We have certain pictures in our head about what the people that we know are like, and because it's a lot of work to track all of the changes, and it always leads to a certain amount of disappointment within ourselves to see that our beliefs about those people weren't correct, we like to make the internal factors of those beliefs more permanent, because changes to them can be more easily dismissed. They are ultimately unfalsifiable. Even when we look at ourselves changing, we prefer to see it as episodic instead of the actual constant stream that it is. It makes it easier for us to reject our past selves and seek reconciliation for things that we perceive as constants, but which are really not. This is what leads to people bouncing from one end of the political spectrum to the other. It's about atonement for past sins and working through the trauma of rejection by the old tribe by which one feels hurt. This isn't a good way of forming opinions about anything, least of all political ones. Politics is not the place to engage in emotional self-care. You are hurting literally every other person by doing this. It is highly dangerous. Political beliefs should never be based on people or events. They must always be based on ideas. And I know that this is difficult because it's difficult for me also. But this is why a lot of people just opt out of politics altogether. But it's something that you need to do out of love for your fellow humans. No one can do this all of the time, but just because a principle is so idealized that it is factually unreachable, that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to live up to it. Thank you very much for watching this video. Like, comment, subscribe, share this to your relevant communities, but do not spam them. My camera's about to run out of fuel. Consider supporting me on Patreon or Subscribestar, buying some of my merchandise or my short story collection. And in that spirit,